The Grant estate gleamed under the harsh afternoon sun, its sprawling manicured lawns and towering columns a testament to decades of wealth and carefully curated appearances. Inside the grand foyer, the air was thick with quiet tension, a subtle but palpable shift that unsettled even the most seasoned staff. The usual rhythm of the household had been disrupted, and whispers fluttered through the marble halls like restless shadows. Angela stood by the sideboard in the servants' hall, her hands folded tightly in front of her, trying to steady the uneasy flutter in her chest. For 15 years, she had been the backbone of the Grant household, a steady presence amidst the swirl of socialite guests, business meetings, and endless demands. She had watched the family grow, cared for their children, managed the chaos behind closed doors, and navigated the unspoken rules with unwavering loyalty. Until today, David and Victoria Grant, the formidable couple who wielded their fortune with the precision of monarchs, had summoned her to the drawing room that morning. The meeting had been brief, cold, and utterly devoid of explanation. Their eyes, usually sharp with calculation, had been unreadable, empty almost, as they delivered the dismissal with a finality that shattered the unspoken contract Angela believed existed between them. No warning, no reason, just a curt thank you and a thinly veiled dismissal. Angela's heart had clenched in disbelief, her mind racing to grasp what had just happened. After years of service, she was being cast aside like a minor inconvenience, a discarded piece in their glittering puzzle. The news rippled through the staff like a sudden storm. In the kitchen, the cooks exchanged worried glances. In the stables, the grooms whispered cautiously. Angela's absence would be felt keenly, her steady hands and calm voice a rare comfort in a world where the Grants demanded perfection without mercy. Yet no one dared to question the decision aloud. Outside the grand windows, the city skyline stood indifferent, a sprawling monument to ambition and excess. The Grants, with their towering empire of luxury hotels, real estate, and investment firms, were icons of success, untouchable and invincible. Their name carried weight in every boardroom and gala, their faces familiar in glossy magazines and charity events. And yet, beneath the polished veneer lay fractures invisible to the public eye. Angela felt the sting of betrayal deep in her bones. How could those who owed her so much loyalty erase her existence with a mere wave of their hands? The question echoed relentlessly in her mind, a gnawing ache she could neither ignore nor understand. As she gathered her few belongings in the quiet solitude of the servants' quarters, memories cascaded through her thoughts. A montage of birthdays celebrated in the Grant nursery, quiet nights spent soothing a restless child, early mornings preparing the household for the day ahead. She had been more than a maid. She had been a guardian of their private world, a silent witness to their triumphs and failures alike. And now, she was nothing. The opulence of the estate suddenly felt suffocating, a gilded cage that no longer offered refuge. The polished floors, the crystal chandeliers, the endless rows of designer gowns and expensive suits, all symbols of a life she had served faithfully but never truly belonged to. Angela's reflection caught in the glass of the grand mirror in the hallway, her dark eyes steady but shadowed with pain. The woman staring back was strong, yes, but also shaken. Years of servitude had carved lines of resilience into her face, shaped by hardship and determination. She was no stranger to struggle. This, she knew, was merely another trial. Outside, the summer breeze rustled the leaves of the ancient oaks lining the driveway, carrying with it the distant sounds of the city, a reminder that life beyond the estate's walls continued, indifferent to her fate. The world was vast and unpredictable, and Angela was about to step into its uncertain embrace. Meanwhile, Victoria Grant sat in the study, her fingers tapping rhythmically on the mahogany desk. Her expression was composed, almost unreadable, but beneath the practiced calm, a storm brewed. The decision to dismiss Angela had not come lightly, though it had been delivered without explanation. It was a calculated move, a severing of ties that Victoria believed necessary to protect the fragile equilibrium of their world. Yet, even she felt the weight of the act, a subtle unease that whispered of consequences yet to unfold. David paced the length of the room, his jaw clenched. The empire they had built demanded sacrifices, and loyalty was a currency that could be spent or revoked at will. But the suddenness of Angela's dismissal left a bitter aftertaste, a reminder that power was a double-edged sword. In their world, appearances mattered above all else, and sometimes the darkest decisions were made behind closed doors. Back in the servants' quarters, Angela drew a deep breath and squared her shoulders. The path ahead was uncertain, and the future shrouded in shadow. But beneath the shock and betrayal, a quiet ember of resolve began to glow. She would not vanish silently into the background, erased and forgotten. There was a fire within her, kindled by years of endurance and the sting of injustice. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the estate's immaculate gardens, Angela stepped out of the servants' quarters and into the cooling evening air. The world beyond awaited, a vast, unpredictable terrain where loyalty could be repaid with betrayal and where strength would be tested in ways she had yet to imagine. For now, the grand estate stood as a gleaming fortress of wealth and power, but beneath its polished surface, the seeds of upheaval were quietly taking root. And Angela, once dismissed and discarded, was about to discover that those who wield power care little for loyalty, but those who possess true strength refuse to be broken. The story had only just begun. Angela sat on the edge of the cracked leather sofa in her small apartment, the late afternoon light filtering through the thin curtains and casting long, slanted shadows across the worn floorboards. The silence around her was deep, almost suffocating, punctuated only by the distant hum of traffic and the occasional creak of the aging building. She stared down at her hands, clenched tightly in her lap, the tremor in her fingers betraying the storm roiling inside her. The news of her dismissal had arrived like a thunderclap, shattering the fragile equilibrium she had built over 15 years. The weight of shock pressed down on her chest, heavy and unyielding. It was not just the loss of a job. It was the snub of a life's work, the erasure of loyalty and dedication with a single, casual dismissal. The bitterness curled in her throat, mingling with disbelief and humiliation. Angela had always known her place in the world, one defined by hard work, quiet service, and an unspoken code of loyalty. She had accepted the invisible boundaries drawn around her, the limits imposed by the opulent world she served but never truly belonged to. Yet, the suddenness of her firing left her reeling, as if the ground beneath her had shifted without warning. She remembered the moment vividly. The cold gaze of Victoria Grant, the clipped tone of David's voice, the curt words that left no room for explanation or protest. No hint of gratitude, no acknowledgement of years spent tending to their needs. Just a sterile dismissal, like a broken tool cast aside. The humiliation was acute. Angela's mind replayed the scene again and again, each repetition deepening the ache. How had it come to this? She had been loyal, dependable, invisible in all the ways that mattered to the Grants. And yet, that loyalty counted for nothing. The sudden severance was not just a professional blow. It was a profound personal betrayal. Her friends and neighbors in the building had offered sympathetic glances, but little else. The unspoken truth was clear. In a world ruled by wealth and privilege, the fall of someone like Angela was expected, even inevitable. But it still hurt more than she could express. At night, sleep eluded her. Restless hours were spent turning over memories and fears, the quiet of the apartment amplifying the pounding of her heart. The absence of the estate's relentless demands left a void she had never anticipated, a strange mixture of freedom and abandonment. Angela's thoughts drifted back to the mansion's polished halls, the endless cycles of chores and care, the whispered conversations in the kitchen, the stolen moments of camaraderie with fellow staff. She had been part of a hidden world, a silent engine that kept the grand machine running. And now, She was cast out, left to navigate an uncertain future alone. The sting of betrayal was compounded by confusion. There had been no warning, no hint that her position was in jeopardy. The Grants had never summoned her for a reprimand or a complaint. The abruptness suggested deeper undercurrents, secrets Angela could only guess at. Was it a personal slight, a strategic move, or something darker, lurking beneath the glittering surface of their lives? The questions gnawed at her, fueling a growing resolve beneath the hurt. Angela was no stranger to adversity. Resilience was woven into the fabric of her being. She had survived hardship before, raised in a neighborhood where opportunities were scarce and obstacles many. She had learned early on that life demanded more than endurance. It required courage and cunning. The humiliation was sharp, but it would not define her. Angela's mind began to sharpen, shifting from shock to determination. She would not allow herself to be discarded quietly, forgotten like a broken tool. There was dignity in standing up, in demanding recognition not just for past service but for her worth as a person. Word of her dismissal spread quietly through the Grant estate staff like a cold wind. The household, once a seamless operation, now felt the tremors of uncertainty. In the kitchens, the cooks exchanged nervous glances, their whispered questions hanging in the air. In the stables, the grooms spoke in hushed tones, speculating about the reasons behind the sudden upheaval. Many had known Angela for years, respected her steady hand and kind heart. Her absence left a void that no one could fill easily. Yet no one dared to voice their concerns openly. The Grants' reputation for ruthless efficiency and the tacit threat of losing their own positions kept the staff's fears tightly locked away. Loyalty, while demanded, was fragile and conditional, an unspoken truth that now hit home with brutal clarity. Angela's departure disturbed the delicate balance of the household. The invisible threads of connection and trust that had held the staff together began to fray. Some felt anger simmering beneath their polite facades. Others battled guilt for their silence. But all shared the same unspoken dread, that loyalty was a fragile commodity, easily discarded by those who wielded power. Outside the estate, the city carried on, indifferent to the personal upheaval within its grandest mansion. Angela walked its crowded streets, her footsteps echoing on cracked sidewalks, each step a reminder of the gulf between the world she had known and the uncertain path ahead. The familiar faces in the neighborhood offered little comfort. Survival here was a daily struggle, a far cry from the gilded halls she had left behind. Yet amid the confusion and pain, Angela found sparks of clarity. Her years in the Grant household had given her knowledge, insights into the couple's routines, their relationships, and their secrets. What others saw as mere service, she now recognized as leverage. The intimate access she had once taken for granted could become her weapon, a means to reclaim control over her story. The thought was both frightening and invigorating. To fight back meant stepping into uncharted territory, confronting a world that thrived on power and silence. But Angela was no longer willing to be a passive victim. The betrayal had ignited a fire, one that would not be extinguished by fear or humiliation. In the quiet moments before dawn, Angela sat by the window, watching as the city slowly awakened. The sky shifted from deep navy to pale blue, the first light casting a fragile glow over the rooftops. She breathed deeply, feeling the weight of the past begin to lift, replaced by a fierce determination. Her journey was just beginning. The shock of dismissal had shattered her world, but within the shards lay the seeds of transformation. Angela's story was no longer one of silent servitude, but of awakening strength. She would rise from the ashes of betrayal, not as a discarded servant, but as a force to be reckoned with. And in the shadows of the Grant estate, a quiet storm was gathering, one that would challenge the foundations of power, loyalty, and justice in ways no one could yet imagine. The narrow streets of Angela's old neighborhood bore the marks of time and hardship. Cracked sidewalks lined with faded storefronts, graffiti-tagged walls, and the hum of life that never quite stopped. Here, In this gritty patch of the city, Angela's story had begun long before the opulence of the grand estate ever touched her world. As she walked the familiar paths, memories rose unbidden, shaping the resolve that now burned fiercely within her. She grew up in a cramped apartment several blocks from the rail yards, the hum of freight trains a constant backdrop to her childhood. Her mother worked 2 jobs just to keep the family afloat, and her father's absence was a silent wound, gone before Angela could form lasting memories. From a young age, Angela learned that survival wasn't a given. It was earned through grit, determination, and an unyielding will to rise above circumstance. School was a battleground of its own, a place where dreams clashed with harsh realities. Teachers saw potential, but the world outside the classroom threatened to swallow it whole. Angela's days were filled with the balancing act of hope and hardship, studying by dim light, caring for younger siblings, and navigating the precarious streets that promised little but demanded everything. Those early years carved resilience in her soul. She learned to read people, to sense danger before it arrived, and to hold her ground when others faltered. Every setback was met with quiet defiance, every bruise a reminder to grow stronger. It was this inner fire that propelled her through the doors of the grand estate when she was barely 18, an opportunity that promised stability, dignity, and a chance to rewrite her story. The contrast between those 2 worlds could not have been starker. The Grant's mansion was a palace of marble and crystal, where polished silver gleamed, and every detail was orchestrated to perfection. The staff moved like clockwork, shadows flitting in service to the wealthy and powerful. Angela had stepped into this new realm with cautious optimism, aware that the glitter hid its own dangers. Yet beneath the surface, she found purpose. The estate became both a refuge and a stage, a place where she could wield control in small but meaningful ways. Her work was relentless, cleaning, organizing, managing the endless demands of the household, but was also a source of pride. Angela was not merely a servant. She was a keeper of order, a silent guardian of the family's fragile peace. Her reputation grew quietly but steadily. The Grants came to rely on her discretion and unwavering loyalty. She learned the rhythms of their lives, the quiet tensions that simmered beneath the surface, and the secrets that no outsider ever glimpsed. In this world of privilege, Angela was an invisible thread holding together the tapestry of their lives. But the strength that had carried her through years of hardship would soon be tested in ways she had never anticipated. Despite her dedication, the sudden dismissal severed the bond she had believed unbreakable. The shock cut deeper because it was unexpected, an erasure of loyalty that left her adrift. As she retraced her steps through the neighborhood, Angela allowed herself a moment to reflect on the lessons etched into her past. The struggles of her youth had forged a woman who refused to be defined by circumstance or discarded without fight. The same grit that had carried her through those early days would now fuel her next move. Her mind flickered to her grandmother, a woman of quiet strength and wisdom who had raised her during long stretches when her mother was working late. Grandma Rose had been a healer of sorts, not with medicine, but with stories, songs, and an unshakable belief in the power of perseverance. She taught Angela that wounds could become scars of honor, that pain could be transformed into power. Angela's fingers brushed the worn locket around her neck, a gift from Rose on her 18th birthday. Inside, a faded photograph of her family, a reminder of roots that ran deep despite the distance time had placed between them. It was a talisman against despair, a symbol that no matter how far she had come, the strength of her beginnings remained. The neighborhood was not without its own challenges. Crime and poverty cast long shadows, and opportunities were scarce. But here, Angela had found community, neighbors who looked out for one another, shared what little they had, and refused to let hardship define their lives. The bonds forged in this environment were different from those in the Grant mansion, but no less real. She stopped outside the corner store where she had once worked evenings to help pay the bills. The owner, Mr. Jenkins, a grizzled man with a booming laugh and a heart as big as the city, nodded at her through the window. They exchanged a brief smile, a silent acknowledgement of shared struggle and mutual respect. Angela's thoughts turned to the future, to the uncertain path that stretched before her. The dismissal from the Grants was a wound, but also a call to action. She would not let humiliation silence her voice or diminish her worth. Her past was a foundation, not a prison. She recalled the words her grandmother often repeated. A woman who knows her value never bows to those who seek to break her. Those words echoed in her mind, steady and sure. As night fell over the neighborhood, the city lights flickered to life, casting a warm glow over the worn buildings and narrow streets. Angela felt a quiet resolve settle over her like a cloak. The road ahead would be difficult, fraught with uncertainty and danger, but she was ready. She would draw upon every lesson learned in the tough streets of her youth, and every moment of strength forged in the grand halls of the Grant estate. The woman who had been blindsided by betrayal was transforming into someone who would fight back with strategy, courage, and unshakable will. Angela paused at the edge of the park, where children played under the watchful eyes of their parents. The laughter and joy were a stark contrast to the heaviness she carried, yet also a reminder of what was at stake. Her fight was not just for herself, but for the dignity and respect owed to every person too often invisible in the shadows of power. The neighborhood, with all its imperfections and struggles, was part of who she was. It had shaped her, tempered her, and prepared her for the battle to come. The lessons of resilience, loyalty, and inner strength were not confined to the opulent walls she had left behind. They were alive in every step she took now. Angela's back straightened, her gaze steady and clear. The journey from the streets of her childhood to the marble floors of the Grant estate had been long and winding. It had taught her the harsh realities of privilege and the quiet power of perseverance. And as she turned toward the dimly lit apartment that awaited her return, she carried with her the undeniable truth. Strength was not born from wealth or status, but from an unbreakable spirit forged in the fires of life itself. Tonight, beneath the flickering street lights and the watchful stars, Angela resolved to reclaim her story, not as a victim of betrayal, but as a woman poised to rise. Angela sat at the small kitchen table in her modest apartment, the dim light of a single bulb casting long shadows across the peeling wallpaper. The silence was thick, heavy with the weight of decisions yet to be made. The room smelled faintly of brewing coffee and old wood, a comforting familiarity amid the chaos of her thoughts. Before her lay a crumpled notebook, its pages filled with hastily written notes, names, dates, and fragments of overheard conversations. It was the beginning of a plan, born from a refusal to be defeated. After 15 years of serving the Grant family with unwavering loyalty, Angela's sudden dismissal had shattered the foundation of her life. The shock and humiliation still throbbed beneath her skin, but beneath the pain, a fierce determination was taking root. She refused to be cast aside silently, to let the world forget her existence as easily as the Grants had discarded her. The time had come to take control on her own terms. Her mind raced as she considered her options. The Grants were powerful, their reach extensive, their veneer of respectability carefully maintained. But Angela knew their world better than most. For years, she had moved unseen through their lives, privy to moments both public and private. She had witnessed their triumphs and their flaws, their secrets whispered behind closed doors. That knowledge was currency, valuable and dangerous. Angela's fingers traced the names scrawled across the pages: former staff members, suppliers, community contacts. People who had worked with the Grants in different capacities, each with a piece of the puzzle. She had already discreetly reached out to a few, testing the waters, seeking allies who might share her desire for truth and justice. The responses were cautious but promising. She thought of the tight-knit community she had once called home, a network of resilience and quiet resistance. The people there had taught her the power of solidarity, the strength found in shared struggle. Angela was not alone. and her fight would not be a solitary one. Gathering support was essential, not just for leverage but for protection. Yet, the path ahead was treacherous. The Grants were known for their ruthless efficiency, their willingness to silence dissent with money or influence. Angela understood that confronting them directly could provoke retaliation. She had to be strategic, careful, and patient. Her gaze settled on a photograph pinned to the wall, a snapshot of the Grant family at a gala, their smiles radiant, their image flawless. It was a stark reminder of the contrast between appearance and reality. Behind those smiles lay secrets waiting to be unearthed. Angela vowed to find them. The first step was gathering information, facts, evidence, anything that could expose the cracks in the Grants' polished facade. She began compiling a timeline of recent events, cross-referencing details from conversations she had overheard during her tenure. Financial irregularities, unexplained absences, whispered rumors of questionable dealings. The threads were scattered but present. Angela's mind revisited the countless hours spent in the mansion's corridors, the hushed exchanges between David and Victoria, the subtle tension that underpinned their interactions. She remembered the nervous glances of other staff when certain subjects arose, the hurried phone calls cut short when she entered a room. These were clues, pieces of a larger story. She resolved to approach former colleagues with tact, building trust carefully. Among them was Maria, the housekeeper who had retired last year, but still maintained contact with some of the staff. Maria's knowledge of the household was extensive, and her perspective invaluable. Angela also considered reaching out to Charles, a maintenance worker who had access to areas off-limits to most. Each contact was a potential ally, a source of insight or support. Angela knew the importance of discretion. Rumors could spread quickly in such circles, and the Grants network was vigilant. She made notes on how to approach each person, what questions to ask, and which stories to listen for. But Angela's resolve went beyond mere information gathering. She needed to reclaim her dignity, to stand not just as a former employee, but as a woman who refused to be silenced. The humiliation of her dismissal had been a blow, but it had also ignited a fire. She would fight back, not with anger alone, but with calculated determination. Her thoughts drifted to the many nights spent caring for the Grant children, smoothing over family crises, and managing household emergencies. Those moments had taught her patience and resilience, but also the importance of seizing control when the moment demanded it. Now, in such a moment, Angela considered the risks. The Grants' power was formidable, and the consequences of challenging them could be severe. Yet, the alternative, submission and silence, was unbearable. She would not allow herself to be erased. The notebook before her grew heavier with plans, outlines of conversations to initiate, records to collect, and strategies to employ. She envisioned a network of support unfolding, a web that could catch the powerful when they least expected it. Outside, the city pulsed with life, indifferent to her quiet rebellion. The distant sounds of traffic and laughter seeped through the thin walls, a reminder that the world moved forward even as her own world shifted beneath her feet. Angela stood and walked to the window, looking out onto the dimly lit street below. The lamps cast pools of yellow light, illuminating patches of the cracked pavement and the occasional passerby wrapped against the night chill. She felt a surge of resolve. This fight would not be easy nor swift. It would demand patience, courage, and unwavering focus. But Angela was ready. The woman who had been blindsided, humiliated, and discarded was transforming into someone who would reclaim her narrative. She would gather her allies, uncover the truths hidden beneath wealth and privilege, and confront the Grants with the full weight of their secrets. The power dynamic was shifting, and Angela intended to be the catalyst. As the night deepened, she returned to her notebook, pen poised above the page. Each word was a step toward justice, each plan a brick in the foundation of her comeback. The path was uncertain, but her purpose was clear. Angela was no longer the silent servant waiting in the shadows. She was a force awakening, ready to fight, to expose, and to reclaim what had been unjustly taken from her. Angela moved through the quiet streets with purpose, the cool evening air crisp against her skin as she made her way toward a familiar neighborhood cafe. The dim glow of its windows offered a refuge from the chill, a place where whispered plans could be forged away from prying eyes and the polished surfaces of the grand estate. Tonight marked a turning point, the first step in gathering the allies and information that could shift the balance of power. Inside, the cafe hummed softly with the low murmur of late patrons and the clink of porcelain cups. Angela spotted Maria seated in a corner booth, her silver hair pulled back neatly, eyes sharp despite the years. The two women exchanged a brief, knowing smile before settling into the worn vinyl seats, the weight of unspoken understanding filling the space between them. "It's been too long," Maria began, her voice a low rumble laced with caution. "I heard what happened. The Grants don't make moves like that lightly." Angela nodded, fingers tightening around the steaming cup before her. It was sudden. No warning, no explanation. Just dismissed. After everything. The sting still lingered, but it fueled her resolve. "I won't let it end like this." Maria's eyes flickered with sympathy. They've always been careful about who sees what. But people talk, especially those who've worked closely. I might know a few things that don't look good on paper. Angela leaned in slightly, her voice dropping. "I need to know everything. Every whisper, every odd occurrence, every hidden truth. If there's a way to expose them, I have to find it." Maria reached in her bag, pulling out a small notebook filled with scribbled notes and dates. "I kept track of some things when I was still inside, odd deliveries, secret meetings at odd hours, the way they shuffled money around. Nothing concrete, but enough to start." Angela's heart quickened. This was the breakthrough she needed. "Do you think others would be willing to talk?" "Carefully, of course. We have to be discreet." Maria nodded slowly. "Some are scared, but others are angry. The staff doesn't forget how it feels to be used and tossed aside. If you approach them right, with respect and caution, you might find allies." The conversation deepened, each woman sharing fragments of knowledge and ideas on how to proceed. Angela jotted down names. Former employees who had left under mysterious circumstances, suppliers who had been paid late or not at all, neighbors who had witnessed unusual activity. Each connection was a thread to be woven into a web of insight. As they talked, Angela's mind raced through strategies. She would have to balance boldness with subtlety, pressing for the truth without drawing dangerous attention. The Grants' influence was vast, and any misstep could provoke swift retaliation. But the growing network of contacts offered hope, a collective strength born from shared experiences and a common desire for justice. After hours of planning, Angela left the cafe with a renewed sense of purpose. The night air was cool, but no longer biting. It carried the promise of change. She felt the weight of the past lifting slightly, replaced by the fire of determination. Over the following days, Angela reached out discreetly to the contacts Maria had suggested. She met quietly with Charles, the maintenance worker, who spoke in guarded tones about strange repairs ordered late at night and locked rooms no one was allowed to enter. With each conversation, pieces of the puzzle emerged. Unexplained expenses, suspicious behavior, and a pattern of secrecy that painted a darker picture of the Grants' empire. Angela also connected with former staff members scattered across the city, each harboring their own stories of mistreatment or unexplained departures. Their voices, once silenced by fear, began to form a chorus of quiet resistance. Together, they shared information, offered support, and rekindled a sense of solidarity that had long been suppressed. Amid this growing network, Angela carefully documented every detail, building a dossier that might one day hold the power to topple the carefully constructed facade. She balanced her urgency with patience, knowing that timing would be crucial when the moment to act finally arrived. But the deeper Angela delved, the more she sensed the dangers lurking in the shadows. The Grants were no strangers to control and intimidation. Their empire was built on influence and the ability to silence dissent swiftly and decisively. Angela felt the eyes of unseen watchers, the subtle shifts in her surroundings that whispered of surveillance. Yet, These threats only steeled her resolve. She was no longer a passive participant in the story of her own life, but an active force shaping its course. The humiliation of her dismissal was transforming into a catalyst for change, a spark igniting a movement that could expose the cracks in the Grants' gilded world. One evening, as Angela returned to her apartment, a shadow detached itself from the alleyway, a figure she recognized from the Grant estate, a messenger of silent warnings. The brief exchange of glances conveyed the unspoken message, "Watch your step." But Angela met it with calm defiance, her spine straight, her gaze unwavering. She understood the risks, but retreat was not an option. The allies she had gathered, the secrets unearthed, and the courage growing within her formed a shield stronger than fear. In the solitude of her apartment, Angela laid out the growing map of connections, the faces and stories intertwining into a complex tapestry. Each thread represented a step closer to unveiling truth, to reclaiming dignity, and to demanding accountability. The path ahead was fraught with peril, but Angela's spirit was unbreakable. The first seeds of rebellion had been sown, nurtured by years of endurance and a newfound determination to fight back. With every meeting, every whispered conversation, and every piece of evidence gathered, the power dynamic shifted imperceptibly. Angela was no longer the discarded servant, but a force rising from the margins, ready to challenge, expose, and transform the world that had once sought to erase her. Angela's nights grew restless as the pieces of the puzzle began to coalesce into a disturbing picture, one that revealed far more than mere personal betrayal. The information she had gathered from her allies, once fragments of gossip and suspicion, now formed a web of dark secrets and illegal dealings lurking beneath the Grants' polished exterior. The reality was heavier than she had imagined, and the implications more dangerous. She sat at her kitchen table, illuminated by the harsh glow of a single lamp, sifting through stacks of documents, photographs, and whispered testimonies carefully collected over weeks. The evidence was unsettling. Invoices with inflated amounts, payments funneled through shell companies, and contracts signed under aliases. There were hints of bribery, tax evasion, and even environmental violations tied to the Grants' sprawling real estate ventures. Angela's fingers trembled slightly as she traced the lines of a ledger that detailed suspicious transactions. Each entry was a thread connecting the couple's empire to unethical and potentially criminal activities. The Grants' public image, charitable, refined, and respectable, was a carefully constructed facade designed to conceal a ruthless pursuit of wealth and power. More alarming were the accounts from former staff and suppliers who had been silenced or pushed out when they stumbled upon these irregularities. Their stories spoke of intimidation, threats veiled in polite language, and a culture of fear that permeated every corner of the estate. It was a stark contrast to the smiling faces the Grants presented to the world. Angela's heart pounded with a mixture of fear and determination. The depth of corruption was staggering, but hiding in the shadows was no longer an option. The truth demanded exposure, not only for her own vindication, but for the countless others who had suffered in silence. She thought back to Maria's cautious voice, warning her of the dangers ahead. The Grants were not just wealthy. They were connected to powerful figures in politics, law enforcement, and the media. Taking them on would be a battle against a fortress fortified by influence and money. Yet Angela knew that silence was complicity. The evidence she had assembled was more than enough to ignite a scandal if wielded carefully. It was a weapon forged from courage, resilience, and the collective voices of those who refused to be invisible any longer. In the following days, Angela met with her closest allies in discreet locations: coffee shops, quiet parks, and back rooms away from prying eyes. Together, they pieced together timelines, corroborated stories, and cross-checked documents. Each meeting strengthened their resolve, transforming individual fears into collective courage. Charles, the maintenance worker, recounted late-night repairs to hidden vaults and unexplained shipments arriving at odd hours. Maria shared her observations of sudden changes in payroll, the disappearance of employees who knew too much, and the subtle manipulation of household accounts. Former suppliers spoke of invoices left unpaid and contracts unfulfilled, all pointing to a pattern of exploitation and deceit. Angela compiled these accounts meticulously, aware that credibility was vital. She reached out to legal contacts she had cautiously cultivated, individuals willing to listen and advise on building a case that could survive scrutiny. The path was fraught with obstacles, but it was becoming clearer. As the network of evidence expanded, so did the risks. Angela noticed subtle shifts in her surroundings. A car parked too long near her apartment, unfamiliar faces lingering in the neighborhood, and the occasional sense of being watched. The Grant's reach was real and relentless. But Angela refused to be intimidated. She fortified her defenses, changed routines, and relied on her allies for support. Her resolve hardened. The fight was no longer just personal. It was a stand against systemic abuse of power. One evening, as she reviewed documents late into the night, a knock echoed softly at her door. Cautious but composed, Angela opened it to find a young woman she recognized from the estate staff, Rachel, a former nanny who had left under mysterious circumstances. Rachel's eyes were wide with urgency and fear. "I heard what you're doing," she whispered. "There's more, things I saw, things I was told. People disappearing, threats made in whispers. I want to help." Angela ushered her inside, knowing that every voice added strength to their cause. Rachel's testimony painted a chilling picture of a household governed by silent terror, where loyalty was demanded but never rewarded. Together, they documented her story, weaving it into the growing tapestry of truth. Each revelation was a blow against the Grants' carefully maintained image, a crack in the armor of their empire. Angela's nights were filled with research, strategy sessions, and quiet moments of reflection. The burden was heavy, but the flame of justice burned brighter with every step forward. She thought of her grandmother's words, "Truth is a light no shadow can hold forever." Those words guided her through the darkest hours, reminding her that courage was not the absence of fear, but the strength to face it. With the evidence mounting and the network of allies solidifying, Angela prepared for the confrontation that would come. The stakes were high, the dangers real, but the time for silence had passed. The Grants' empire, built on deception and exploitation, was vulnerable, and Angela, once dismissed and discarded, was ready to expose the darkness hidden beneath their glittering facade. Angela stood in the quiet corner of the public library, the soft hum of fluorescent lights above and the faint rustle of turning pages around her creating a cocoon of calm amid the storm brewing in her life. Across the table, Maria and Charles sat with her, their faces etched with determination as they reviewed the carefully compiled dossier. The weight of what they held was immense. A collection of documents, testimonies, and evidence that could shatter the Grants' carefully constructed facade. The moment of confrontation was near, and Angela felt a mixture of anticipation and steely resolve. For weeks, she had navigated a labyrinth of secrets and dangers, gathering allies and unearthing truths hidden behind the veneer of wealth and privilege. Now, armed with irrefutable proof, she was ready to face the couple who had cast her aside so callously. The plan had been crafted with precision. Angela would confront David and Victoria Grant directly, presenting the evidence and demanding accountability. It was a bold move, one that required courage, clarity, and unwavering conviction. The power dynamic that had long favored the Grants was about to be challenged in a way they had not anticipated. Angela's mind replayed the countless hours spent listening to whispered conversations, observing subtle interactions, and piecing together the Grants' intricate web of deceit. She had learned their patterns, their weaknesses, and the cracks beneath their polished exterior. This knowledge was her weapon. Arriving at the estate under the guise of returning a forgotten item, Angela was met with the familiar grandeur of the mansion, the gleaming floors, the ornate chandeliers, the hushed bustle of staff who recognized her but dared not speak. The atmosphere was charged, as if the house itself sensed the impending reckoning. David Grant appeared first, his expression shifting from polite surprise to guarded skepticism as Angela handed him the thick folder. Victoria followed, her eyes narrowing with a flicker of unease masked by practiced composure. For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy and electric. Angela spoke with steady clarity, her voice firm but measured. "I've spent weeks gathering information, documents, testimonies, and evidence that expose the truth behind your empire. Illégale transaction, exploitation, intimidation. The people who once served you have stories that demand to be heard." David's jaw tightened, his gaze cold. "What do you think you're doing, Angela? This is a private matter." "It's not private when it involves breaking the law and betraying the very people who trusted you," Angela replied, meeting his stare without flinching. "I'm here to demand accountability, to ensure justice for those who have been silenced." Victoria stepped forward, her tone sharp. "You have no idea what you're meddling with. You're risking everything, your reputation, your safety." Angela felt the weight of their threats, but remained unshaken. "I've lost much already, but I won't be intimidated. The truth will come out, one way or another." The tension in the room was palpable, the unspoken battle lines drawn. The Grant's power was formidable, but Angela's courage was resolute. The confrontation was not just about past grievances. It was a challenge to the very foundation of their control. Over the next hours, Angela laid out the evidence in detail: financial records showing illicit payments, accounts of intimidation from former employees, and documented instances of unethical practices. The Grants listened, their faces masks of disbelief, anger, and calculation. David and Victoria exchanged terse glances, the veneer of control slipping as the reality of exposure settled in. For the first time, the empire they had built on secrecy and influence faced an unrelenting force determined to dismantle it. Angela's allies, waiting discreetly nearby, were ready to support her if needed. The network she had built was a testament to the power of solidarity and courage. The confrontation was a turning point, not just for Angela, but for everyone affected by the Grant's actions. As the meeting drew to a close, Angela stood tall, her voice steady. "This is your chance to make things right, to take responsibility and begin to repair the harm done." David's expression hardened. "You'll regret this." Angela met his threat with calm defiance. "No, I will not regret standing for justice." As she turned to leave, the room seemed to hold its breath, a fragile moment suspended between past wrongs and an uncertain future. The confrontation had shifted the balance of power, setting in motion forces that could not be contained. Outside, the city lights twinkled indifferent to the drama unfolding within the mansion's walls. But for Angela, the fight was far from over. She had taken the first bold step toward exposing truth and demanding accountability, knowing that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. Yet, beneath the weight of uncertainty, a quiet hope stirred. The courage to confront injustice had been found, and with it, the possibility of change. Angela's journey, once defined by silence and dismissal, was now a story of empowerment and relentless pursuit of justice. The morning sun cast an unyielding glare over the city, but inside the modest apartment where Angela sat, the atmosphere was electric with tension and cautious hope. The news had broken hours earlier. A carefully orchestrated leak to a reputable journalist had sent shockwaves through the media and corporate circles alike. The Grants, once untouchable icons of wealth and influence, now faced the relentless glare of public scrutiny. Angela's phone buzzed incessantly, messages and calls flooding in from friends, allies, and even strangers who had seen headlines. The dossier she had assembled, the testimony she had gathered, and the confrontation she'd braved had culminated in a scandal that reverberated far beyond the gilded walls of the Grant estate. News outlets splashed the story across front pages. Allegations of financial fraud, intimidation, and moral corruption tied to the Grant's empire. The narrative was stark: power wielded without conscience, loyalty betrayed, and a family's legacy tarnished by greed and deceit. Social media buzzed with outrage and support for Angela's courage. Inside the Grant mansion, the atmosphere was drastically altered. The once confident couple now moved with cautious haste, their public statements carefully crafted to salvage reputation. Their empire trembled under the weight of investigations launched by regulatory agencies and the mounting legal challenges that loomed. Angela watched the unfolding drama with a complex blend of vindication and resolve. The victory was not hers alone. It belonged to every voice that had been silenced, every story that had been buried beneath the glittering facade. Yet, she knew the battle was far from over. Her allies gathered in a small, secure location that afternoon, faces marked by exhaustion but lit with the fierce glow of triumph. Maria, Charles, Rachel, and others who had stood by her side shared quiet smiles and nods of solidarity. Together, they had transformed whispers into a roar impossible to ignore. But the fallout was not without cost. Angela received veiled threats, subtle warnings woven into anonymous messages and shadowed encounters. The Grants' influence was far-reaching, and their desire to protect their empire remained undiminished. Nevertheless, the tide had shifted. Investigations uncovered further discrepancies, and legal experts began to unravel the complex web of deceit. The public's attention, once captivated by luxury and glamour, now focused on accountability and justice. Angela's personal journey mirrored the broader awakening sparked by the scandal. She found herself invited to speak at community gatherings, advocacy groups, and even panels on corporate ethics. Her story resonated as a testament to resilience and the power of standing against injustice. Yet amid the accolades and attention, Angela remained grounded. The scars of betrayal and struggle were still present, reminders of the cost of courage. She understood that true justice required more than exposure. It demanded systemic change and unwavering vigilance. As the weeks unfolded, the Grants faced increasing legal pressure. Their empire, once seemingly invincible, showed signs of crumbling. Board members resigned, partners distanced themselves, and the public's trust eroded. The couple's social standing diminished, replaced by a cloud of suspicion and disgrace. Angela's actions had ignited a movement that extended beyond a single family or scandal. Conversations about workers' rights, corporate responsibility, and the hidden costs of wealth gained momentum. Communities once marginalized found a voice, and the powerful were reminded that no empire was beyond accountability. In quiet moments, Angela reflected on the journey from dismissal to empowerment. The path had been fraught with pain and uncertainty, but had also revealed the depth of her own strength and the power of collective action. She knew the road ahead remained challenging. The fight for justice was ongoing, requiring vigilance and courage in the face of entrenched power. But the victory so far was undeniable, a testament to the truth that even the mightiest could fall when confronted by those who refused to be silenced. As evening settled over the city, Angela looked out her window at the fading light. The world was changing slowly but irrevocably. And in that change, she found hope, a hope born of struggle, resilience, and the unyielding pursuit of justice. The morning sun streamed softly through the curtains of Angela's modest apartment, casting a gentle light on the worn furniture and stacks of papers that chronicled a journey few outsiders could imagine. The rush of the past weeks, the scandal, the confrontation, the media frenzy, had begun to settle into a quieter rhythm, allowing space for reflection and growth. Angela sat at her small kitchen table, a cup of coffee warming her hands as she read letters and messages arriving from across the city. They were notes of gratitude, support, and newfound respect from neighbors, former colleagues, and even strangers who had followed her story. The woman once dismissed without explanation was now a symbol of resilience and courage, a beacon for those who had suffered injustice in silence. The transformation was profound. Angela felt the weight of years of hardship lift slightly, replaced by a growing sense of purpose and validation. Her life, once defined by servitude and invisibility, was now a testament to the power of standing up and speaking out. Her community embraced her with open arms. Invitations to speak at local forums and advocacy events poured in, each opportunity a chance to inspire others and highlight the importance of dignity, fairness, and accountability. Angela's voice, once muffled by fear and circumstance, resonated with clarity and passion. Yet, amid the accolades, she remained deeply aware of the journey that had brought her here. The scars of betrayal and struggle were etched into her memory, reminders of the cost of courage. She carried both pride and humility, understanding that her story was part of a larger tapestry of voices demanding change. At neighborhood gatherings, Angela shared her experiences openly, encouraging others to find their own strength. Her message was simple but powerful. Your worth is not defined by the status others assign you. Stand firm, speak loud, and demand respect. The ripple effect was tangible. Former domestic workers, laborers, and community members found renewed confidence, organizing support networks and advocating for better treatment and rights. Angela's story became a catalyst, igniting conversations that challenged long-standing inequalities and inspired collective action. In quieter moments, Angela reflected on the personal growth that accompanied her public journey. She had learned to trust her instincts, to harness her knowledge, and to navigate the complex dynamics of power with savvy and grace. The woman who had once been blindsided by dismissal was now a strategist and leader. Her relationships deepened as well. Bonds formed with allies who had stood by her, united not just by shared pain, but by mutual respect and commitment to justice. Together, they planned initiatives to support workers' rights, legal aid, and community empowerment. Angela also took time to reconnect with her roots. Visits to her childhood neighborhood, conversations with her aging grandmother, and moments of quiet reflection grounded her, reminding her of the resilience that had been nurtured long before the grand estate. The journey was ongoing. Challenges remained, legal battles continued, and the fight against systemic injustice was far from over. But Angela faced the future with a steadfast heart, buoyed by the knowledge that her voice had made a difference. She understood that true power was not in wealth or status, but in courage, integrity, and the willingness to stand for what is right. Her story was a testament to that truth, a narrative of growth, empowerment, and the unbreakable spirit of those who refuse to be silenced. As the sun rose higher, casting light over the city, Angela felt a profound sense of peace. The path had been difficult, but it led to a place of strength and hope. She was no longer defined by the past, but by the promise of what was yet to come. Her journey continued, not alone, but alongside a community awakened and empowered, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead with resilience and determination. Angela stood at the threshold of the community center, the modest building buzzing with life and hope. The once quiet neighborhood hall had transformed into a hub of activity, a place where voices previously silenced could now gather, share, and build a collective future. It was here that Angela's vision was taking shape, a foundation dedicated to preserving dignity, promoting justice, and empowering those often overlooked by society's powerful. The foundation bore her name, but it stood for so much more. A tribute to resilience, a monument to courage, and a beacon of change sparked by one woman's refusal to be discarded. The walls echoed with laughter, determined conversations, and the steady hum of collaboration. Workshops on workers' rights, legal clinics, and support groups filled the calendar, drawing people from all walks of life. Angela moved through the room with a quiet pride, greeting familiar faces, former colleagues, neighbors, and new friends united by a shared purpose. The barriers that once divided employer and employee, rich and poor, had begun to dissolve, replaced by a community bound by empathy and common struggle. Her journey from the margins to the center of this movement was a testament to the power of steadfastness and belief in justice. The scars of her past did not define her. They fueled her mission. Each story shared within these walls was a thread weaving a tapestry of empowerment and solidarity. The foundation's impact rippled beyond the neighborhood. Local officials took notice. Policies began to shift, and conversations about fairness and accountability gained momentum across the city. Angela found herself at the heart of a growing movement that challenged entrenched systems and demanded respect for every individual's humanity. She often reflected on the journey, the dismissal that had once broken her world, the shock and betrayal that followed, and the fierce determination that transformed despair into action. The path had been arduous, marked by moments of fear and uncertainty, but also by extraordinary courage and unexpected alliances. Angela's work extended beyond advocacy. She championed education, creating programs that equipped workers with knowledge and tools to assert their rights. She fostered mentorship, connecting young people with role models who had overcome adversity. The foundation became a sanctuary where hope was nurtured and potential realized. In the quiet moments between meetings, Angela would gaze at a photograph hanging in the foundation's office. A simple image of the Grant estate, once a symbol of exclusion and power, now a reminder of the change she helped catalyze. The mansion's walls had echoed with silence and secrecy. Now, outside these walls, voices rose in unison. The story of Angela and the Grants became a touchstone for discussions about privilege, justice, and the transformative power of courage. Media outlets revisited the scandal, now framed within a broader narrative of social awakening. Angela's role was celebrated not just as a whistleblower, but as a leader who inspired systemic change. Yet, Angela remained humble, grounded in the knowledge that her work was part of a larger, ongoing struggle. The foundation's doors stayed open to all who sought support, justice, or simply a space to be heard. The fight against inequality was far from over, but the foundation stood as a testament to what was possible when ordinary people refused to give up. As she addressed a gathering of supporters one afternoon, Angela's voice carried the strength of experience and the warmth of hope. True wealth, she said, is not measured by money or status, but by the courage to stand up for what is right, the love we give to others, and the loyalty we show to our communities. The crowd responded with applause, a chorus of affirmation that echoed through the room. Angela's journey, from a dismissed Maid to a beacon of empowerment, embodied the profound truth that miracles happen when ordinary people refuse to surrender. Outside, sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating faces filled with determination and possibility. The foundation was more than a building. It was a living, breathing symbol of resilience and justice. Angela smiled, knowing that while her story had begun with loss and betrayal, it had grown into a legacy of hope and transformation. The glowing embers of courage and loyalty she had kindled now burned bright, lighting the way for generations to come. If you love the story, like the video and subscribe.